So, hey, welcome back to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. I'm really happy to have my friend Captain Bob Waltz with me. Bob is with Southwest Airlines. His background is pretty great. It's a pretty spectacular background. Vice President of Flight Operations for the airline for the last couple of years. Before that, he was the Part 119 Chief Pilot, and he's back to flying the line. So, Bob, I'm just happy to have you on board. We're going to talk a little bit about the safety, the culture of safety throughout the industry. If that's
Great.
okay.
I'm glad to be here, Frank. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I love it. What's happening in Texas today?
Oh, just getting through the weather. I was out flying last night, as a matter of fact, and came in from the west and watched all that weather pushing off to the east here. So, obviously our hearts go out to all the folks getting beat pretty badly by some of those storms out east. But thankfully today it's overcast, but not too bad of a day here.
A friend of mine last night, he sent me the line of, did a screenshot from his cockpit of the line of storms.
Oh yeah. It was amazing. We could see, literally from the Gulf of Mexico, I think all the way up across the Great Lakes, there was just a line of just severe weather that was monstrous. And for me, lucky, because normally I would probably be going that way. So it just so happened I wasn't last night. But it was quite a bit of weather to deal with.
I just told him he was on a Challenger 350, and I just said, 450 is a good altitude to fly. And that's probably not even good enough. So
no, not for some of those storms. They were packing a punch.
So good, but so hey, look, let's talk. We've gone a little over 10 years without a major mishap in the commercial airline world. Let's talk about the culture of safety a little bit.
Sure.
That's ingrained in, literally everybody talks about safety as the number one mission. And the fact that we could go millions of flights without a major incident is amazing.
It really is. And, I think some of it goes back to some initiatives that came from the FAA and an acknowledgement that there may have been some gaps in the past in certain areas of training. When you really think about in the airline industry, we have done so well in some of those areas that used to be really problematic areas, controlled flight into terrain, runway excursions during emergencies, say an engine fire on takeoff, those kinds of things. We built training for those. We built systems to help, mitigate the risk in those areas. And they've essentially, knock wood, become non-events. Just a number of years ago now, it's probably been about 4 or 5 years ago, the FAA stepped up, and I thought it was very timely in directing extended envelope training and upset prevention and recovery training for both anyone who's going to get an ATP, and then for the carriers to implement as well, the Part 121 carriers going forward. And I'll say this is some of the best training that I ever received in the simulator and that I ever had the chance of giving. I was a check airman at the time as well at Southwest and was one of our extended envelope trainer initial cadre. And what we did there were things that you normally wouldn't do in a transport category airplane. But if you had been lucky enough to maybe have gotten some spin training in your civilian training, or if you're military, we did a lot of that stuff in the T-37, the stall spins, spin prevents, all that kind of stuff that we could then now in these highly accurate simulators taking extrapolated flight data and some actual flight data that was built in to see how our airplane, the 737, would handle not only in the approach to stall, but in the deep stall, in every part of our envelope from, takeoff and touchdown all the way up to 410, and giving a chance for pilots to see what the recovery techniques were like, how the aircraft handles, and then give them confidence in the airplane that these are very well-designed machines, the Airbus as well. Any certificated airplane these days are designed to standards that are really set up to help you succeed if you recognize, let the airplane do what it needs to do, and then recover. So if you'll note, it was interesting. They had predicted, the FAA had said, the next crash more than likely would be one in which folks lost control of an airplane that was flyable in one of these types of events. And you'll recall we did unfortunately have that incident down around Houston where a 7.6 inadvertent activation of the go around mode, and then, the recovery techniques and all that stuff didn't work out well. So that being said, I think the emphasis on training, the acknowledgement that everyone needs to have hands-on training really takes us to another level. And that's why that's why we are where we are today, that generally speaking, there's not too many surprises. You at least have some muscle memory now, should you find yourself in one of these conditions.
How much are, obviously it's Southwest and in American United, Delta, et cetera. How much are you all, are the pilots, in the simulators? Obviously there's the standard things that are needed to keep the type certificate, the standard emergency procedures to keep, your type certificate. But, are the instructors really throwing a lot of interesting scenarios at pilots and training them on different, pick a scenario,
Right. And that's a great question, because, it used to be, prior to the advent of the advanced qualification program, and most Part 121 and 135 carriers now train under this, as opposed to training under what we consider conventional Part N and Part O training programs. The AQP, the Advanced Qualification Program, embeds within it the best parts of SMS, safety management systems, in that what it's designed to do is take the data from your airline, whether it's FOQA data, flight ops quality assurance data from the airplane itself, or at Southwest, we call it FDAP data, other, from ASAP reports, from irregularity reports, any of those reporting mechanisms you have at your particular carrier, and take those issues that seem to be problematic, as well as data fed from training that are there still areas. For instance, our guys and gals having issues with V1 cuts, our guys and gals having issues with whatever the problem might be that might be unique to your airframe. And over time, if they still hit a certain threshold, they're woven back into that next cycle's training. And they're continued to do that until you see a point where you can then start backing off of some of those areas. And then meanwhile, other areas have probably popped up, in the interim. Not to mention what we call your bread and butter, like you had said. You will always go in on your training day, because the way we do our training, and different carriers do it a little different, but it's all under the auspices of an AQP. We use 1 day for maneuvers training, and in that day, we will run the gamut, and it'll be a workout, and you'll probably leave the box with a little bit of sweat, but it's a good workout, because you'll do all those things that you may not get a chance to do much during the year. You hopefully aren't doing terrain avoidance, thunderstorm avoidance, go arounds and, engine out. You'll probably fly a good portion of your time in the box on one engine, probably the majority of it on one engine, just to get you familiar again and let your hands warm up and give you that confidence in the airplane. The next day, and this is what you were probably talking about in the scenario, there's a scenario-driven event. It's a line oriented evaluation. That's actually your check ride. In that, on that day, you will show up, and in the box, you will probably do 1 or 2 legs. Like that's usually what we do at Southwest, because we fly short legs anyway, some of the time. And embedded in those legs will be a number of different issues you're going to have to deal with, really designed to evaluate the crew, how well they use what we call risk resource management, RRM. Some airlines call it crew resource management. Same thing for the most part. How well they get through these scenarios, how they handle the aircraft, how well they abide by our standard operating procedures in an environment that they're more used to, rather than in the old days. And you probably remember as well, back when you had a check airman, you had to get the gouge on, hey, what were the systems they liked to do, and what were the things they liked to hit you with in the box? Because if you didn't know that, you really could be hit with anything. So we're a little more standard. We also train. So in the course of a cycle of a number of years, we'll train the entire aircraft, all the systems, but we'll alternate, say maybe in a 3-year cycle, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, so that you'll get a chance to sample everything, but you'll do it in a way that you don't have to prepare for everything every time, because that also, you can lose focus. So a really long answer, but I prefer our airmen and airwomen, the folks on the line, prefer this system so much more to the old school N&O. They feel like they come out with a better flavor of what's going on, because they know the things we're hitting them with, or that we get hit with when we go in, are things that folks have seen on the line. So it's almost like an inoculation. It's like the flu shot. It's a year out, so you miss the cycle. But if it happened in year 1, by the end of year 2, all of your crew members have seen it, if it's that important. So I think because of that, we don't make some of the same mistakes over again either.
One of the things, you talk about, SMS, safety management systems, and, one of the big advances, crew resource management, just cockpit communication.
Yes.
You think about the basics of, making sure everybody's on the same page up in the cockpit, and how far has CRM come along, and how much further does it need to go?
Oh, that's a great question. And it was interesting when I was VP of flight. That would be whenever I had a chance to speak with our new FOs, and I would usually see them about 6 months in for their 6-month kind of leadership check-in. The first question I would ask them, I'd ask them two. One, and I hope, and I really wanted honest answers to this. Is the airline everything you hoped it would be? Is this job everything you hoped it would be? Separate issue. That's one that usually would find its way, to that evening at the bar over a beer. You get that one answered. But as far as their experience on the line, are our captains, and is the environment standard in the way that you were trained it should be standard? Are we following our SOPs? When you show up, do you feel equipped to go do your job because of the training you received here? And, easily more than 9 times out of 10, the answer is it's, everybody will shake their head yes. Everyone will have a one-off. Unfortunately, there still are one-offs, and that's something we work on, not because we want everyone just to, like a military formation, dress and cover and everything be exactly alike, because you have to have a little bit of room to maneuver in the aviation world, because it is a fluid, it's a dynamic environment. But it should never be to the point where your partner doesn't know what the heck you're doing. Right. That's the thing, when there are the issues that make me a little concerned, or when you see someone who might actively choose to, say, disregard an SOP, because under SMS, we have a way that if that's a bad standard operating procedure, it doesn't work, please start with, it's a written suggestion, a verbal suggestion, talk to one of your supervisors. There's ways to filter that into our system, to change the system, to make it better, so that everyone can do what we ask them to do, because that's where you normally see your first drift. Right. Is where folks, you ask them to do something that, you want me to use this to do that. I can work around this, or I've got a rule of thumb that works better and lets me get the job done faster. I'm going to use my rule of thumb. And well, if that rule of thumb's okay, maybe we implement that into our manuals. Maybe that's the right thing to do. So we're getting there. We're better than we've been, but by no means are we perfect. And I think any organization that thinks they are probably is deceiving themselves, because probably right below the surface, there's something that's kind of bubbling that needs your attention.
No doubt. So now we're tracking. We're gonna get a little bit more difficult now.
Okay.
Bob's opinion. Obviously, Bob's opinion here. Pilots. We've got, the industry is stressed.
Yes.
It's just stretched thin right now. 9/11 came. It crushed commercial aviation. Then we've got COVID coming along. It crushed commercial aviation.
Yes.
So now we've got a whole new issue, and we've got a lot of pilots coming to the airline that are new. The amount of professionalism is extremely high, but it's still a lot of new pilots learning a lot of new procedures and a lot of new, look, it's just a new culture. It's a new place. Does that concern you a little bit?
And that's a great question. And again, I'll caveat it with Bob's opinion again, and we know how the saying about opinions. But yes, I think that, and it's interesting when we look at what I've been with my airline almost 23 years now, and I've weathered quite a few issues. Respectfully and without any thought about the folks that we lost during 9/11 and all of that. The repercussions for the airline industry coming out the other side of that, once security and all that was kind of worked out, really, thankfully, weren't as far-reaching or were recovered from in a way that then 08 came along, and then a little bit of the financial slowdown and all of that going on. Challenges there, but then came the pandemic, and the pandemic was just something just so different in the fact that it essentially ground to a halt the industry for an unspecified amount of time with very unspecified criteria as far as to what will it take to safely be able to operate all of those things, and then we saw such a great change in the entire work environment for not only the airlines, but for everyone in the service industry. And in Bob's opinion, I think we still struggle in the service industry, and I consider airlines as part of that in trying to get back to where we really were. Because who would have thought we would say in 2023, I wish we could go back and party like it was 2018 or maybe even 2019, as far as in those days prior to the pandemic coming on full swing. You could do the things you wanted to do. Restaurants were open, resorts were open, airlines had seats. You never really worried about getting on a jet. All of those things were not there yet, as we know. It's been kind of fits and starts coming out of this. Essentially at Southwest, and I'm sure this is indicative at other carriers as well. Approximately about a third of our employees didn't work at the company prior to the pandemic.
Right.
That's indicative of a lot of large companies. And we really don't know where what the work is going to look like, I think, post-pandemic. So what do you do in that space? You have to think of, and I know we do, I think of Southwest as we're kind of a 52-year-old startup right now in a lot of ways, that the senior folks, we have to mentor, we have to get our hands dirty, we have to be there to help the new folks understand what this business is. We have a generation of very young folks who maybe or maybe not set out to be pilots or be in the aviation industry. And then once they got there, learn what this is like, a seniority-based system. That's a tough thing to resonate with some young folks these days. I would say we have the greatest disparity, but the disparity is also an opportunity between, say, the values and ideals of our most senior pilot and our youngest pilot on the seniority list. If you put those two folks, you put them in the flight deck, you might look and go, what in the world do these two folks have in common other than wearing the white shirt and the stripes and their profession? So, yeah, I think we're concerned. We're spending a lot of time talking about some issues and working through issues that maybe you wouldn't think you would have had to have done maybe a decade ago. But that's just a factor of the society we live in. What people value, what a new pilot may value their time, maybe more than they value their money. Maybe young family, and the same things that we did when we had young families. But their expectation is also, hey, this seniority-based system doesn't quite fit that. And whatever the next contract looks like, I wonder if it could look a little bit more like some of these other good companies out there that recognize, lifetime family work balance. So that's a challenge. And I think all the carriers are going to have to rise up to meet it, and we are. But I think it will look different for pilots in the next contract or two. Going forward, especially as the environment in which we work changes as well, with lots of discussion around single pilot, lots of discussions around urban air mobility and other things, that all of these things will impact the fixed wing world, I think, in the very near future as well. So concerned, but I think we're stepping up. It's an interesting time, to say the least.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, does the pace? I mean, a lot of hiring going on. Everybody's out.
Yes.
A lot. So I got to think as a senior captain, you're looking at your first officer and saying, how long you been with the company? And, that's got to be an interesting conversation because there's so much new hires coming on.
There are. And I think what's really, I'm happy this has come along at a time when you've already got this environment that a safety management system, that Part 5 has, been, since it's been mandated for carriers, and it's really getting down to the line level now. And again, the line person doesn't have to understand some of the nuances of what committee does what to what. That's not really what it's about, but it's about ascertaining the risk level for the operation you're doing right now, right in the moment. In the military, we called it operational risk management, ORM. Sometimes we had little score sheets, we had other ways, but you can do that without one. You don't have to get fancy, but understanding who the person is you're flying with, a little bit about their background, how long they've been at the company, and being ready to be that mentor as a captain and to do that instruction. That's actually part of our role as a captain. You could get very complacent because for years you've had folks coming in who, at a minimum, were a check airman, if not evaluator, if not leadership at their company, and then they show up in your right seat. Talk about having an asset right there. We won't have all of that going forward, in that, the folks will be a little younger, but it doesn't mean that they're not well trained. And helping them get over those first couple hundred hours, helping them understand how our operation works. You do have to do a little bit of that, but also being welcoming and being there so they know you're a resource, because you can easily build a wall with that. You know how that can go.
Oh yeah, Well, yeah. I mean, it was like flying with the skipper in the Navy. I said nobody wanted to fly with the skipper.
Yeah,
you just wanted another lieutenant. You just wanted another lieutenant, right? And
exactly.
This guy going to wrap me out. So it's interesting. 1,500-hour rule. Everybody is now talking about, hey, look, the pace of the hiring is rapid. The scarcity of the pilot pool is becoming a little pronounced. Do we need to back off 1,500 hours and say 1,000? Would you be comfortable with that?
It's interesting, and the devil will always be in the details. Obviously, we want well-trained folks showing up at the airline to bring in your training program and then to put out onto the line. You could easily argue, wouldn't we be better off, or would there be some advantage in bringing folks on at that point and letting them get their, however many 100 hours, however you wanted to break it down, maybe some blocks of 100 hours, get that experience at the airline in your training program, flying your SOPs, flying under your risk resource management, paradigm, and flying with very capable instructors, maybe having, again, going back to the days of, we use check airmen for just about all those roles today, but maybe there is room for the training captain role, or even in some foreign carriers. I know, speaking with some of my friends over in Europe, they'll have a training first officer who, early in a first officer's career, they'll be riding with the training captain. The training captain is ultimately responsible for the flight and the safety, but they'll have these FOs who may ride along for a trip or two, a couple of day block or two, because they intimately know that role so well, that even probably better than a check airman can, because the check airman is doing a little bit of everything. These FOs, let me give you the skinny on how to get this done well, be efficient, be ready, and then you can then concentrate on your continue to grow your flying skills and all that come with time. So I think if you could do it well, and you were tight with the stipulations on who did what to who, and you use the same level of assurance that we do today in our training programs, it could be workable. The challenge will be, I'm not sure the flying public is there, and I'm not sure that all carriers, it would require them to step up And that might be something that all carriers may not be in a position to do those things. So that was a very caveated answer.
Yeah. Well, no, I get it. I mean, I'm really I know a lot of foreign carriers, 250 hours, 300 hours total time. They're putting people in the right seat. And I'm like, that does it to me. They don't know. I mean, we can look at the two incidences. I'll pick on the MAX for a minute, and you can sit there and say the two MAX incidents. I said, well, you got, very low time first officers in the right seat. And in an emergency like that, they don't have enough experience to deal with it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think
the outcomes have been different.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, and that's the thing I think that gives everyone a little bit of pause. But for those two issues, and thankfully, great strides have been made both with with the FAA, with Boeing, with others on system safety. That now, when you fly the MAX today, it's a better airplane than the one that we flew then. But again, even at Southwest, we elected to fly after the first crash because we knew what the issue was. We knew how it presented itself, and there was a remedy for it. That being said, you have to have that confidence in your team, I think, and that's tough. It's going to be tougher across the global industry simply because everyone's just getting younger. It's good to have a great flush of new kind of blood into the team. But I think we have to build our game plans differently, knowing that that's the experience level of our team.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, from a passenger standpoint, I love the MAX. I think it's one of the most comfortable.
Oh, I do too.
I think it's one of the most comfortable airplanes out there. I mean, I love it. I think it's actually a really good machine. It's a shame that it sort of got tainted, and that too will pass.
Yeah.
The other question I have though is this: we talked about great CRM. A lot of foreign carriers, I think the over reliance on technology. Are we, I know in the United States, most, just about all our entire pilot pool from a very young age, they've had access to a Cessna 172, a lot of private airports, they grew up and around, where airplanes are a very common thing. But if you go to parts of Asia or parts of Africa or even parts of Europe, all of a sudden, the first time a person ever sees an airplane is when they're going to training, and then they become heavily reliant on the systems. Does that bother you a little bit at all?
It's the good news is, and I share a lot of what you're thinking and kind of where you're tracking on that issue. It's good to see worldwide that the how we're training pilots, the exposure that we're giving them is better than maybe it was even just a couple of years ago. That there's a lot of inventive thinking in this space, and even to the point of and one of the things, it's nice to have a little bit of extra time, but I've been blessed. I've been asked to be on a number of advisory panels and boards. And I do believe strongly in how we train, that there is an opportunity for even things like virtual in the world of VR, that if you can't necessarily have all the things you need in a small, say, village somewhere, but we know you can probably get internet because people are TikToking there. So if they're TikToking, we can train them. Get folks in and give them an ability to be essentially hands-on with a lot of things that they wouldn't have had a chance to do. Because I think something that's also very different too, and it's just interesting. And I had this conversation with my oldest daughter, and she is 28, and she's an aircraft dispatcher, flight follower, now a manager of SMS of all things for a large rotary wing company on the West Coast. But I laughed growing up because they were horse girls and they knew how to handle wrenches. They could get the old mules started. Whatever we needed to do to take care of those horses, they just did because it was ancillary to getting there. There's a lot of young people today, and I'll pick on the boys a little bit, who probably don't know the difference between a standard and a metric socket. Maybe they don't even know what a socket is. And I grew up in a world of, you took your bike apart, you took your car apart, you took whatever. If it had an engine, I'm going to take it apart and learn how it works. And so all of that is a generational difference as well. That is you have to, I think, bring into your training programs and be sure folks understand the theory enough so that they can think outside the box when a problem happens. But then you also have to train in such a way that the systems are reliable enough so that we don't have to have custom-made solutions every time the smallest problem happens. And it's in that mix that things have shifted in the demographic of who's flying. And I would agree. So hand flying skills, terribly important. I mean, that's the funny thing about the 7.3. Our standard operating procedure at my carrier, and I still felt this way because I also felt this way in the C-130. You start having a problem, the first thing I do is maintain aircraft control by turning off the automation. I want to feel what the airplane's doing. Now, fly-by-wire systems, different thing, but we only have one fly-by-wire system on the MAX. The other variants of the 7.3 have none. So you still can get some feel. And actually, touching the throttle quadrants, same thing. And, on the Herc with the condition levers, touching the feel for vibration, trying to get a feel for what the gauges may not tell you. Those skills, I don't think are lost, but I do believe that the emphasis as aircraft have become more complicated, the thought process is the minute a problem happens, we want ICAS, we want a pop-up, checklist that's actually maybe getting done for you, and we want the automation on. I don't know that that's always the best system solution. So I think that's a danger in how we design our equipment. I think we have to be very wary of it as we go forward.
I think the human machine interface still needs to be there. And that's the issue. So
yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly.
It's just interesting how technology creates new. It's not. It's just new. I don't want to say new questions, new problems, but it just changes.
It does, and it can
introduce
risk, and that's the beauty of it. And again, you can tell. And recently minted PhD in SMS, but I thought it was that important that understanding how risk creeps into the operation is the best way to prevent that next smoking hole somewhere. And if we can deal with that risk and recognizing something as risk, we make a major change to a flight control computer and system, we need to understand how the various failure modes then might present themselves, because that's risk. You just open the door, inviting risk to come on in. If you don't address it, unfortunately, you will find out about it, because as we know, Murphy's going to show up whether he bought a ticket or not. He's going to be on your flight at some point. And the best we can do at the front end will prevent those issues, once something hits the line.
Absolutely, no doubt. So, last question, and then I'll let you off the hook here. We've had, obviously the big thing in the news lately is some ATC stuff around the country, some runway incursions. You and I have been around. We've been around airplanes a long time. I sort of shrug my shoulders and go, "So what? It's always been happening. Now it's just a little bit, more visible with ATC.net on the internet and everybody's iPhone." Your comments. I think everybody on the airport, everybody around the airport is looking out for each other at the end of the day. Any comments on?
No, I do, and I appreciate that. It is, and you and I think I talked about this topic in another setting, but I knew this is a funny world we live in when even my mom who's 85 years old, one day we were chatting on the phone and she asked me, speaking of the Boeing Max, she asked me about MCAS. And the fact my mom uttered the term MCAS to me, I just had to stop her. And for my mom, who was a homemaker and, and I love and respect her and a woman of strength and character, but was not, technical things were not her thing. Right. She was the emotional and all that. Where did my mom even hear MCAS? So that drives to your point. These devices that we carry, that I'm surprised we don't have chips embedded in us yet. That will come, I'm sure, that we all feel very well equipped as experts because we got Wikipedia at our fingertips. And I say that with respect. The flying public deserves to know whatever they want to know, because again, they are the customer, and that's the reason this wonderful industry exists. But for the flying public, we'd be just delivering boxes and doing that kind of stuff. So all of that said, the fact that yes, there are some things happening. And I commend, acting Chairman Billy Nolan talked a little bit about, statistically, these don't really come up and hit a trigger level. Mm-hmm. But again, because of the proximity of aircraft and kind of what he's doing is on the fly, he's reevaluating their SRM basically, because you would normally set up standards in advance of, hey, what constitutes a trigger to look at to do what we call a system assessment. We may not quite be there, but there's enough visibility because of the heightened public awareness that drives us to take a closer look. I do think that there is room to explore ATC manning. They have challenges just like all of us do in the transportation industry. They have already asked for the summer for carriers to maybe try to hold back a little bit. That will be hard, but I think everyone is going to kind of pull together and do what they can do. And I think there are opportunities that will avail themselves. And we saw it come out most recently in a SAFO that just came out, reminding crews of a number of things they can do to increase situational awareness, maybe a little bit of an earlier listening watch, to understand where airplanes might be in the pattern. Definitely in those low weather conditions. If you've ever been out in done the lowest RVR takeoffs and taxis that we can do, it's amazing. We wouldn't even do that stuff in the military. It was funny. Some of the, we have equipment that we can do it safely, but you're pretty much in a big golf ball. It's about all you can see. And you have to really depend on your controller. You have to depend on your other equipment that allows you to know where aircraft are and double down on, hey, that's the tool I need to concentrate on in my situational awareness building. So it's a healthy time for us to step back and go, what can we do better? I don't think it's a reason to stop flying by any means. And I don't know that it's even necessarily a reason to have to roll out tons of new technology. I think a lot of the tools are already there. It's just never assume, because it can happen to any of us any day, lining up with the wrong runway, inadvertently, being cleared to land on the wrong runway. Those kinds of things we have to just continue to each time, every time, block and tackle. Because if you don't block and tackle well, you're never going to be an elite team. And you miss a tackle, that, in our business, that can be deadly. So,
I think it all comes down to, this is what I wish the media would portray a little bit. It's everybody's job. You're cleared to land on a runway. It's your job to be listening on the radio too, to make sure somebody else wasn't cleared on the runway, or somebody wasn't cleared to cross it. Or if you think something is amiss, you don't scream and moan about it. You do what you need to do to keep everybody safe, and then you come back and you talk about it later in a professional manner. And I think that's what, like you said, it's an industry where everybody's looking out for everybody in a non-punitive way.
No, I think you're right. And then those tools are still working, and they're very healthy. They work well. It's unfortunate that, when you think about it, even with the MAX, some people might say, hey, the MAX was grounded with a tweet. Now, for some reason, that's what shows up on the news, instead of an acknowledgement of there are formal processes going on in the background that are working well, and they will make the decision. If we needed to stop an operation, we would. But 9 times out of 10, you don't. 9 times out of 10, it's okay. What are the things we need to do just to be better? So I would agree with you. It's if everyone can inhale and exhale, wriggle their toes, I think we're going to get through okay.
Awesome. Hey, Bob, this is a good place to jump off. Thank you for coming on.
Sure, it's my pleasure. Be well, my friend. Good to see you.
You're going to have you back. How do you like being out? I know those. How do you like being back on the line?
Well, I love the jet, and I love just being out in the operation, because that's we all dream about that. I hate to say it, no one really dreams about being an airline executive. I don't think. I think we all dream of getting out there and flying aircraft, and then that's a lot of fun. And seeing the support and hearing from folks, especially folks you didn't get a chance to see a lot while you were in the role, that's been nothing but just it makes me misty, the support that's out there. So good people, great company. I feel blessed.
Good for you. Love it. So thanks for coming on, Bob. We'll do this again soon.
Great to see you.
Thanks.
Take care.
I hope you enjoyed the latest edition of the Aerospace Executive Podcast. You can reach out to me directly, Craig at NorthstarESG.com, or check us out at www.northstaresg.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, or on YouTube. Just do a search for Aerospace Executive Podcast. Thanks again. I'm Craig Pickett.